everyone's doing well this morning. Before we get started, just a quick announcement regarding Vespers. Vespers will be in Chestnut Chapel this Sunday evening at 5 o'clock, so same time. Megan Park will be speaking on her experience traveling in Australia this past spring and summer, and how travel and getting out of your comfort zone can help to push you to reach your fullest potential and capacities. So, without further ado, I'll invite Mike Park to the podium this morning and get us started.
Megan Grant, not Megan Park, Megan Grant.
Megan Grant, thank you. Megan Grant will be speaking. Okay. Mike Park now.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Fortunato asked me to open today's chapel with this quote that he shared with us during convocation, so feel free to read along also. Always remember, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think, and loved more than you will ever know. Mr. Fortunato.
Good morning. It feels at times like we live in an age where everything is political, in which virtually every subject we talk about could at any moment suddenly become heated or charged or the subject of controversy that the right wing or the left wing or the wingless pundits might pounce on to demonstrate how bitterly divisive that topic might be. I said to Mrs. Fortunato and Maddie and Katie over breakfast a few days ago that despite how much I love a good vigorous debate, and I'm a studious follower of partisan politics at all levels, especially these days when we have the incredible political theater of the start of our presidential election cycle, I nonetheless wanted to settle on a chapel topic that was decidedly and entirely not controversial in nature, that felt more personal than political. So as breakfast ended, and I closed the lid on my jar of Skippy Creamy, honey roasted flavor, to be exact, in the kitchen at Sharp House, with the encouragement of my kids, it came to me. Peanut butter. I could talk about peanut butter. It's my hands down favorite food for about 40 years running. It's my go-to meal or snack. It's my breakfast sandwich for almost every morning of my adult life, beautifully complemented by a frosted can of Diet Coke with lime to start the day. It's the breakfast of champions. Sorry for all those nutritionists in the audience, but my kids love the idea. So I had the start of my chapel topic. I mean, how controversial could the topic of peanut butter ever get? So it turns out that after a quick visit to Google, peanut butter is perhaps more divisive than I imagined. It started with this gripping headline. Okay, now that I've opened the door, I have to get a show of hands. Who here stands on the side of chunky over creamy? Okay, all right. I didn't mean to start something that was going to become so incredibly divisive. Yes, of course, this must be one of the great ideological debates of our time. My Googling then of the search terms peanut butter and controversy took a sudden and even darker turn. So, I tried to pretend that I didn't see that one. This was followed by a bizarrely intriguing headline. So I have to go ahead and tell you, I actually tried it, and it's somewhat disgusting, but I don't think it should be a measure of whether we should vote for someone's son or daughter to be president. So I finally limited myself, okay, I'm going to do only one more search in my peanut butter chapel research, which led me to this. And true, it's not precisely peanut butter related, but it in fact did make me laugh, if not lose a little bit of hope in the future of our country. All right, let me turn this off. All right, okay. All right, so before I unintentionally politicize peanut butter and possibly polarize the entire school between those liberal-leaning Skippy zealots or right-wing conservative Jif supporters, let me tell you why on earth your head of school would ever decide to frame a chapel around a sandwich spread, albeit one that is ubiquitous, popular, and incredibly tasty, like peanut butter. So I suppose it's this: a peanut butter sandwich. It's simple, and it's seemingly a small thing, but it's my comfort food. It's one of the very few things in my entire life that simply hasn't changed. It's always familiar and comfortable, and whenever and wherever I have one, it feels like I'm home. I can trace it back to various experiences in my life, staying up obscenely late trying to find some way to finish my grad school papers and projects after working a full-time job and not getting home till 11 o'clock at night. Feeling far more stressed than I ever remembered being, I recall spending time with Mrs. Fortunato in our first house, sitting behind a desk, highlighting, typing, and eating peanut butter, sometimes in my darker hours with a big spoon right out of the jar. Highly recommend it. Pacing the hospital hallways the night after Maddie was born, trying to keep myself awake to help with the overnight feedings, the diaper changes, the constant crying. It was his crying mostly, but often mine too. I stayed conscious with the help of a portable, neatly folded over peanut butter sandwich that I could eat while balancing him on my shoulder and surviving sleepless nights. As I departed from Blair a year or so ago to travel for my first time across Asia, I remember watching with a bit of embarrassment the scale weighing my suitcase at Newark Airport's United Airlines check-in, and initially seeing it register 51 pounds. Yes, and for you frequent travelers, that's indeed 1 pound over the limit, thus requiring the extra heavy baggage fee. And I remember thinking I just packed the most expensive 16-ounce jar of Skippy Honey Creamy Peanut Butter that I will ever eat in my life. But I have no regrets, for in addition to experiencing a wealth of new foods across Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, and China, I also brought a little piece of home, of the familiar, with me. So speaking metaphorically, although maybe literally at some point, it's my wish to offer all of you, all of us at Blair, a peanut butter sandwich, or the symbolic equivalent. So what do I mean by that? For every opportunity there is at Blair and in life to step outside your comfort zone, to take risks and to grow, something we, as you heard from Mr. Powell today, something we are committed to doing here all the time. I also want to help all of us create and nurture a rich and satisfying comfort zone from which to venture and explore. A comfort zone that contains the things that help keep you grounded in times of turmoil and change, adventure, loss, and uncertainty. That helps you feel more like you, even when circumstances make it hard to do that. I believe a key to venturing outside your comfort zone is the security of having a comfort zone that you can rely on in the first place. And while peanut butter sandwiches are only a small, tiny symbol of that, of life at rest, of calm, constancy, and safety, or home for me, I've discovered, certainly for me, that it's important to intentionally build, protect, and hold on to the things that help me stay me, that help me stay connected and sane and grounded, enough in comfort so that I can in turn face the things that really are uncomfortable, that are new, and that are hard. So how do we do this? How do we find or hold on to our comfort zones, create ones that nurture our souls and our identities without stifling or keeping us from venturing outside our proverbial hula hoops? So I suppose a starting point is being conscious of and thinking about and naming those things, the places that make us feel this way. A former student of mine in Massachusetts years ago, when he was struggling with experiences and events that understandably shook his 17-year-old world, asked me with no small measure of desperation to help him again find a way to become centered, to find a tether to things, to find a gravitational pull to something that made him feel safe and secure at a time when nothing for him felt that way. It was a surprisingly mature and honest, and for me, daunting request that he made in these early days of knowing me, when a friend of his brought him down to our teen center and said, "Oh, just talk to Chris, like he'll figure it out for you." Those were days when I was Chris and not Mr. Fortunato to my students. So after seeing him nightly, I'd give him rides home from the teen center virtually every evening, and we'd wind up sitting in front of his house, often talking for a very long time about how to keep his feet on the ground, even though the earth kept shifting beneath his feet in a very volatile life. We often attracted some attention sitting in front of his house, me often wearing a tie, he with his brightly dyed green hair and a fake orange prison jumpsuit that he liked to wear to get a rise out of people. It's really hard to capture in words that fashion statement and how it played itself out, other than to say that he looked very much like a large, angry human carrot. Yes, green, orange. At one point, a police officer actually slowed down as we were talking in front of his house and asked if I was okay, if I was in need of assistance. We were indeed quite a sight. For weeks we went looking for his comfort zone, for anything to help him feel the stability of a world that often felt like it made just too little sense to him. Early on, we were able to start finding it in things like music, the songs that he listened to that helped him feel grounded and feel good, that he would put on repeat and fall asleep to. It was the repetition of favorite foods for dinner at our center, the really greasy hamburger and bacon pizzas and oil-saturated French fries that we'd have more nights than we should have. After a few months had gone by of his hanging out with me and my staff, as I was driving home, we had what seemed to be somewhat of an epiphany. He said he'd found what he was looking for. His comfort zone was a physical place. It was our center that in fact helped him feel like he was, well, centered. And as time went on, safety and comfort and good feelings came in the form of ping pong and foosball tournaments and basketball games in our gym, band concerts on weekends and pasta nights on Fridays, and a routine of daily conversations. And then circumstances came up in his family such that he had to leave abruptly, without much of a chance to process or say goodbye. It's a hard thing, it's an unsettling thing in life to really see someone's fear, sadness, and sense of desperation when you look in their eyes. But I remember seeing it that night when he had to leave, and when he said that all this work building up his center, his comfort zone, had been for nothing. I remember standing there, not quite certain of what to say, feeling as he did what seemed to be this crushing sense of unfairness of it all, and feeling like my words could not do justice to the situation or help him. So I'm not sure quite how it happened, the lucky firing of neurons in my brain or bringing back the right memories at the right time, but I said something equivalent to the quote that Mike started chapel with, that I ended convocation with this year. I remembered hearing those words in my younger days, and though I suspect when I told him them, I probably butchered the actual words in sequence. But I remember telling him that he'd always be able to find his center, his comfort zone, no matter what things he had, no matter in what place he was. Because near or far, he would always have the people he let into his life thinking of him. And he always had the power to let more people in. Well, I promised to stay in touch with him, and I have over all these years. I encouraged him that the secret to feeling grounded and centered is not a place, it's not things, it's not even peanut butter sandwiches. It's instead having people with whom you can be yourself, even if it's just for a short period of time, even if it's not forever. So I start to look back at those moments I mentioned earlier, my peanut butter sandwich moments, my stressful grad school late night study sessions, my bleary-eyed pacing with Maddie, newborn Maddie in hospital, my busy plane hopping through Asia far away from home, and realized, it was never really the peanut butter sandwich that made me feel comforted or safe or centered. It was who I was with, or who I was holding in my heart when I was going through it all that made me feel that way. It was, for me, Mrs. Fortunato. I told Mrs. Fortunato before we came here that I was going to embarrass her by proclaiming that she is, alas, the jelly to my peanut butter sandwich. She is indeed what makes me feel at home as a watchful keeper and defender of my comfort zone. So all of us experience change and loss and moments of discomfort or discontent and confusion to varying degrees. Some of you are going through that right now. Just weeks into a new school year, not living at home maybe full-time for the first time in your lives, eating foods that are very different from where you come, living with roommates, experiencing sports or academics that might be more challenging than you have known before. So what do you do when your comfort zones are in need of refueling or refreshing or even rebooting? Besides eating peanut butter sandwiches, listening to your favorite music, and holding on to your favorite stuffed animal or blanket, I think you do this. I think you look to the people around you and figure out the ones who might become your people. We find our comfort zones most fulsomely through our relationships with others. And finding your person, finding your people more than anything else is the key to creating that foundation, the comfort zone from which you will launch yourself to do things that you may have never imagined were possible. It's an incredible gift to have people in your life whom you can trust, who you can share your frustrations with, your joys, with whom you can tell sometimes the ridiculous or mundane things that go through your head, the dumb jokes you can't tell others. Strangely enough, finding your comfort zone often actually starts by being vulnerable, by opening yourself up to others who could indeed possibly maybe not see you for who you really are. But when it does work, that vulnerability turns into power. I like to tell the story of how Mrs. Fortunato and I met. She applied to be a volunteer in my nonprofit, so I had the unusual but handy opportunity to both conduct reference checks and a criminal background screen on her before we went on our first date. And yes, she passed. But beyond that, I had always been pretty guarded about who I let into my life, being somewhat of the control freak that I am. It was something that often contributed to a feeling of being alone, even though I had a lot of friends and family and peers around me. She, for me, was an amazing teacher about the power that comes from being authentic and being vulnerable, and how special it becomes to have your person in front of you, who you can sing off key to, with whom you can cry at Disney animated movies once, or weekly, who you can watch guilty pleasure TV shows with and admit that you often feel like you don't have the answers to questions that you're supposed to have. So when I talk about finding your people, finding your person, I'm not at all talking just about finding the romantic loves of your life or the one person. There are so many opportunities right here in front of us in this community to let others in who can build up our comfort zones and challenge us to stretch beyond them. So who is or who will be that person for you? Who are or who will be your people? It's your advisors, your siblings, parents, teachers, friends, roommates, and for whom are you that person? There's so much potential and opportunity right around us to let good people in to share our worlds. I think very often of those who don't have that sense of connection, whose comfort zones are darker or more fragile places than they need to be. Ultimately, what motivated me more than anything to shift careers from law to working with kids was a driving impulse to help young people feel connected, to not feel so alone. Because I and so many of us in this room know or have experienced what it's like, and we know how limiting and tough that can be. So with that in mind, I'd like to take a few moments to help you feed your comfort zones. All of ours, in fact. Right after convocation, a Blair parent so generously gifted to me a painted canvas with the Winnie the Pooh quote that I ended convocation with and that Mike started with today. All right. Yes, it's not the Donald Trump one. This quote, these words, I feel are ones that cannot be stated or shared enough. Whether right now or sometime in the future, they may be words that help any one of us get through some challenging times. Or they're words that can help open doors to friendships and connections that make our experience at Blair rich and special. So I'm going to ask you to do the following. You all have, or hopefully all of you have, a small card with this quote on one side and a blank side on the other. I'd like you to do the following over the next few minutes before we leave chapel, and thank you in advance for your willingness to try this. I would like you to write a note to someone in this community, and after chapel, share it with that person. Whether you drop it off in a mailbox, give it to them, put it on their desk in their room. And the note could be one of three things. It could be a note of gratitude, a thank you to that person for being your person, someone who cares for you and has been an important part of your life. It could be a note of encouragement to someone who you think might really need it now, who may need a reminder of what this quote is saying, because they need another person in their lives. Or finally, it could simply be a note saying, let's grab lunch or coffee or a Diet Coke with lime or anything that you might want to have and get to know one another better, because there are so many amazing people in this community and stories that we have yet to hear and learn at Blair. So all I ask of you is this. Take a few moments to think about this. Write something, even if you choose not to deliver it. And give, while we do this, one another a few moments of respectful silence to do it. And while you do it, our good friend Will Siggety is going to play the piano to inspire our thoughts. Will. job, Will. Thank you. Thank you all for doing that. I just ask before we end today that out of respect for others and for the community that if you chose not to do this, that you don't leave these behind or leave them on the ground. And if you choose not to give them to somebody or not keep them, please make sure you recycle them. So I offer you one final reminder to close chapel today that was courtesy of Mrs. Fortunato before I finished writing this a couple nights ago. So feed your comfort zones. Be good to one another. For each of you matters a great deal to all of us. Seniors first.